So let's look at VMware Workstation for Windows. In the last video, we looked at VMware Fusion for Mac. And now we'll look at VMware Workstation 6 for Windows. So let's open it up. Just going to start up. Now, VMware Workstation is a very nice virtualization program for Windows. I prefer it more than Virtualization Workstation for Windows, but it depends on which virtualization program you prefer. A lot of people choose to use Windows Virtual PC, but we're going to be looking at VMware Workstation for Windows. So this is what it looks like. And upon opening it, we have here options, new virtual machine. We can create a team of virtual machines that allows us to create multiple virtual machines, each sharing the same type of configurations. We can open existing virtual machines or teams. Now, teams is a unique and feature for VMware Workstation, and we'll talk about that when we get to the VMware Workstation chapter in this service pack. Right now, we just want to take a little overview on VMware Workstation 6. And that is what we are running. So let's go at what we want to do is we want to create a new virtual machine. And this is what we do. We went to new, file new, and we're going to create a new virtual machine. For the sake of this video, I'm going to create a custom virtual machine to show you all the nice little configurations you can create. A typical virtual machine basically is an easy setup, but I want to show you all the nice things here. What's so nice about VMware Workstation is that it's backwards compatible. So you can create virtual machines for Workstation 6.5, Workstation 6, Workstation 5, and 4 for previous workstations. I have also noticed that VMware Workstation is also compatible with VMware Fusion for Mac. So if you have a VMware Fusion virtual machine, you can run it in VMware Workstation and vice versa, which is also nice. Here we can choose the method of installation. We can use a disk or an image file. We can choose install operating system later. So we'll choose that. And here are the various operating systems like we looked at in previous virtualization programs. Here we have Windows. We have Windows 3.1 down to Windows Server 2008 64-bit edition. Just like I said in VMware Fusion, you can run Windows 7 in here. Now, the issue is for many virtualization programs is that even though it doesn't list the specific operating system, you can run it. But the problem is the virtualization program like VMware Workstation might not have the software or the VMware tools, as they call it, to install upon the virtual machine, which helps the virtual machine run a lot easier on your computer. But you don't necessarily have to worry about that too much. So this is all the Windows operating systems. We have Linux. This is going to look very similar to VMware Fusion, as we looked at in the last video. Norvell NetWare, Solaris, and other MS-DOS, and so forth. So let's say we want to create a Windows XP Professional virtual machine. We'll give it a name, and it's going to save the virtual machine in your Documents folder under Virtual Machines, Windows XP Professional. You can change that if you prefer. We can give it a number of processors. I'm going to give it 1 because I'm not going to use it that much. This is just a demonstration. And here we have this nice little scroll in which we can set the amount of memory. This yellow rectangle represents guest recommended minimum. This green represents the recommended memory for the virtual machine. And this blue represents the recommended maximum amount of memory. I'm going to stick with the recommended memory, 500 megabytes. And here's the network. We can go ahead and share the network. I always leave the network at default so that my internet access can be transferred to the virtual machine. We can choose adapters, I/O adapters. And we can select a disk or create a disk or use an existing virtual disk. So we're going to go ahead and do create disk. We're going to select the virtual machine disk type. IDE is what I'll choose. We can create the amount of disk space we want. 8 gigs is the default, but we can go ahead and change this. And all of these settings can be changed and altered after you create your virtual machine, and even when the operating system is installed. You can always go ahead and change these settings. I'm going to leave it at the default. Allocate all disk space now allocates all the disk space and pretty much creates the disk immediately, taking off some space off your actual system. And we have some other options here. We'll look at all of these things in the future. And this is the disk that we've created, and here's a nice little summary. Finished. And once we create the virtual machine, we have it starting up, and this talks about activating. Once you install it, you're going to have to activate Windows and so forth. And here we have Windows XP starting up, and it talks about the connected devices. And here we have a blank hard disk ready to be installed for Windows XP. Like I mentioned in previous videos, we did not create a Windows XP operating system. We simply created the components and the hard disk. We're going to actually have a Windows XP Professional license copy and install it. So we can go ahead and kill this. We're going to say stop. And when we go back to Windows XP Professional, now we see here a list of options that we can go ahead and change. We can go ahead and change the disk space, memory. I must note to Windows users, if you install Windows and after the installation and activating of Windows, if you go back and change some of these settings, I believe it will require you to reactivate Windows every time you change or drastically change some of the options here. So just know that if you're going to install Windows, make sure that you have exactly the type of options you want for the virtual machine, so that you don't have to change the settings again and have to reactivate Windows, because that can be a real pain. So this is us creating a Windows XP Professional virtual machine. The next video we'll be looking at Parallels Workstation, which is very similar to Parallels Desktop for Mac. So we'll be looking at that. That's it for this video.